Welcome to the Low Demand Parenting Podcast. I'm really
Thank
glad you're here.
you.
Tell me a little bit about how you came to specialize in helping solo parents with high needs kids to parent in a way that both tends to them and brings their families into a measure of peace. It's such a
Yeah.
needed but also very specific expertise. So tell me about how you got to be here.
Yeah. So I started my career as a clinical psychologist and a neuropsychologist. And even with all of that, so that means I went to school for far too long and I'm a total brain nerd. But even with all of that, I have to say what has challenged me the most and stretched me the most and taught me the most is being a single mom to a super awesome and strong-willed neurodivergent kiddo. And so I went on my own journey of really taking a deep dive into figuring out how to support him the way that he needs and deserves in a way that's aligned with my values and with my needs. And it's always a work in progress. It's not like I'm done and I've checked it off the list, but learned a ton, made lots of progress in terms of supporting him and in terms of his challenges that he was facing. And in that process, felt really increasingly passionate about supporting other parents. And so I became a parenting coach, a JAI certified parenting coach. And I do support partnered parents also, but I have increasingly been focusing on or specializing in supporting single parents because I've noticed that there's so many beautiful parenting resources out there, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful. And a lot of it is applicable no matter what your parenting situation, right? We all struggle with emotion regulation and meltdowns and tantrums and all the things. But then there are some challenges that tend to, and we're talking generalizations here, but there are some commonalities that we tend to find with single parents. I really felt passionately about creating resources and spaces that do name the experience of single parents, acknowledge it, and create this space where you don't feel like you're the only one out there who doesn't have that white picket fence two partner family.
So tell us this is low demand arena here, which I know you're familiar with. So
Yeah.
tell us what low demand parenting in your understanding, or the kind of parenting that you teach, what does it look like when you don't have a partner to tag in?
Yeah.
What are people missing about what that experience is like?
Yeah. So I want to back up for just 1 second and talk about language. So I just want to name that some people identify with solo parent, some identify with single parent, some are divorced and say, does that mean that I'm a single parent? And so I want to say, what I'm talking about is if you are the only adult in the home or the only guardian in the home, you may live with grandparents or something like that. Really, I'm speaking to you if this is what you identify with. So low demand, one of the challenges, as I know you're very familiar with, is that when you lower demands for your kid, one of the concerns is that puts more demands on me, right? So if
Mhm.
I can't count on them to unload the dishwasher, then I'm the one having to unload the dishwasher, right? If I can't
Yes.
count on them to brush their own teeth, then I have to do that too. And so there is certainly this tension. And when you are the only adult in the home or the only caregiver, the only person who is taking on that caregiver role in the home, it is a lot. And one of the things, so I like to call stress the great magnifier.
Mm.
It takes things that are true for everyone and makes them even bigger and more true, right? And single parenting brings with it a lot of stressors, or usually does. And again, I want to say these are generalizations. There are some single parents who are beautifully well supported, and that's amazing. And there are some partnered parents who feel utterly and completely alone. When you feel like you're the only parent doing it, that is a huge stressor. And again, there's financial stress, there's emotional stress, there is psychological stress. You mentioned this a little bit, there's a grief, right? So
Mm.
most people who are parenting solo didn't expect to parent like this. They didn't expect their life to look like this. There is this like adjustment, this mental adjustment. And like any kind of grief, it can hit you when you don't expect it. It can come in like these little landmines, right? Something reminds
Mhm.
you and makes you think of it, these waves, similar to if you have a kid who doesn't fit the mold that you expected, right? And so then when you're single parenting a neurodivergent kid or a kid who has differences, now we have multiple things that are different than what you
Mhm.
expected. And they
Yeah.
may have some positives and beautiful things to them, but this is not what you thought life would look like. And so there is this degree of like acceptance work that I think it requires. And I like to talk about the yin yang of permission and perspective. And
Mhm.
so giving yourself permission to feel those prickly feelings, to acknowledge the hard stuff, to validate for yourself. This is not hard because I'm a horrible parent. This is hard because this is hard. This is hard because I am carrying more than I can carry in a society that doesn't support me in doing that. Right? Validly, legitimately hard. And you're allowed to feel that.
Yeah.
And then the perspective piece is we don't want to get stuck in those heavy emotions. And so the perspective piece brings in often we're falling into a lot of thinking traps of, for example, thinking other people's lives are better than are like perfect and magical and unicorns and rainbows, black and white, all or nothing thinking, catastrophizing, making things really bigger than they necessarily are. And all these limiting beliefs, these internal core beliefs that are deeply ingrained and often hard to recognize, let alone to shift. And so that's part of the work is learning how to safely experience those prickly feelings and give yourself the space and permission to do that, and how to effectively bring some of that perspective that can keep you from getting stuck in those prickly feelings. And the acceptance piece is another part of that puzzle. So I know I just threw a lot at you. I have more to say, but I'm going to
Yeah,
pause.
we could go deeper into some of the pieces. And I want
Yeah,
to acknowledge that we're also having this conversation as two white presenting people. And so
100%.
there's also so much of a layered experience. We're talking about layered experience already, and a piece of the
Yeah,
layered experience that gets unseen, which is that question of how much support does the person have internally in their own family network. Maybe they have a partner, but that partner is unable to show up or is
yeah.
really struggling and needs more support than they offer. And that's just a really unseen,
Mm-hmm.
unvisible aspect of the parenting experience
Mm-hmm.
that deeply layers with every other marginalization, every other source of
Mm-hmm.
discrimination, every other place that society is deeming some parents more or less worthy than
Yeah.
others. And of course, that intersects with gender and with
Mm.
sexual expression and family constitution and with race and ethnicity and language and nationality and the United States, like so many elements of immigrant identity that are tied up in what you can and can't drop in terms of demands. And so that's an
Yeah.
element too, that every one of those then hooks like a little link into the experience of single parenting and of single parenting a specific kid who, as you said, is different in these key
Yeah.
ways. And I think a big piece that we have difficulty talking about is the mental load that each
Mm-hmm.
one of those means. So tell
Yes.
me a little bit about what it's what is unseen or unspoken and how you help parents to bring words to the invisible mental load that they're carrying.
Yeah. And part of it is that grief that I mentioned, right? Again, acknowledging that and building tools so that when you step on that invisible landmine, you know that you can ride that wave and get yourself through it. There is a lot of fear, I think, when you're the only adult in the house about emergencies, for example, right? Or if you have multiple kids, especially, right? What if one child is having a huge meltdown and you have other kids that you need to worry about and you are only one person? And so we need to acknowledge these very real challenges and come up with a plan and talk through that ahead of time so that you're not in the moment trying to figure out a really tough situation. And I find that there's a lot of parenting resources that talk about like preventing the hard stuff, the meltdowns and the tantrums. And personally, when I was going through my hardest moments in parenting, I felt frustrated that a lot of it skipped over but what do I do when it's actually happening? How do I actually handle that? And yes, that's lovely if I can prevent it. Of course, that's the ultimate goal, but can we name the tiger in the room and talk about how to handle it? Right. And yeah. And so, really like acknowledging that. And I think a lot of parents are self conscious and scared to
Mhm.
say aloud what's actually happening in their homes because it can be scary, right? And it can feel like you're the only one who has handled this. And it can feel like there must be something horribly wrong. And if I name this, someone is going to think I'm a terrible parent or my child, something's terribly wrong with my child. So these are things that I think are helpful to give airspace to name, to give a safe space to. One thing that I think is really hard for any parent, and maybe even more so single parents, is asking for help and accepting help and shifting what you are giving yourself permission to consider accepting. Right. So I
Mhm.
just spoke with a client the other day and she was like, I literally have no one. I have no family nearby. I have no one that I can ask for help with. I have no one who can watch my kid for a half hour if I need a break. And as we were talking, it started to emerge. She actually does a lot at church. And there's a woman who can watch her kid while she's doing something at church. And there are neighbors that she has a connection with and an interaction with. And the thing is, we tend to black and white this a lot, I
Mhm.
think. And I say we because I do too, because it's really hard to ask for help and it's really hard to accept help. And your brain wants it to be a certain way. You want to have a certain kind of relationship with someone that you're going to ask for help from. And the reality is if you don't have that, we're not choosing between choice A and choice B. We're choosing between desperately wanting choice A to be true, it
Mhm.
not being true, us being repeatedly exhausted and disappointed with it not being true,
Yes.
versus accepting that choice A is not currently on the table and finding a choice B that is workable. It might not be perfect, but it's workable. And so that is like a piece of the acceptance piece of it's not perfect right now, right? Perfect is 20 miles in the rearview mirror, maybe. And you can't change that. But what you can change is what's right now and what you're doing for the future. And part of that is shifting what you're willing to accept.
Yes, I'm thinking of the work of Jessica Slice in the book Unfit Parent. Jessica Slice writes a book about the experience of being a disabled parent and how
Mm,
disability communities have long de-shamed interdependence and requiring daily help as a part
mm,
of the human experience. And as a part of the human experience, it deserves dignity, deserves support. And so, what Jessica argues is that disabled parents are actually, in some ways, better prepared to be parents because asking for help
interesting.
is such an important part of every parent's experience.
Yeah.
And the inability to ask for help becomes disabling. It becomes a real barrier
Yeah.
to getting that flow. And I just love the way that she takes that common idea that the best parent is independent and capable and does it all themselves and just flips it all on their head.
Mm,
And it says maybe the best parent is the one who already knows that their body is weak and vulnerable and
mm,
that none of us can do this alone. That in a way, single parents also can and have that gift into the parenting community that there could be this false belief that we're just supposed to rely on one other person, and that's the person we're married to, and they're supposed to do everything we
Yeah.
can't. And that somehow the two of us and that white picket fence and everything's going to be fine behind these doors and inside these walls. And of course, we know that's a big
Mhm.
fat lie.
Yeah.
And yet there's a protectiveness to keeping that lie in place. We can talk about why
Mm.
society, we've decided that's our convenient lie.
Yeah.
But single parents have stepped outside of that lie. They're like, that isn't my truth. And I wonder if, in some ways, that reflection back of it takes work, it takes the hard work of grieving, as you've mentioned, of radical
Hmm.
acceptance, of letting people help you, even if they're not the people you wish were helping
Hmm.
you. Are there other important truths and wisdom gleaned from the single parenting experience that you
Yeah.
think
I
coupled
want to add
parents
on to what
find
you just
beneficial?
said, which also adds another piece of it, which is that as you were talking about like this like overemphasis on independence, I was thinking, yes. And I think that also translates to what we're told we need to teach our kids. There's this like huge focus on independence is the only thing that matters, right? And if you have an independent kid, then you have been successful. And that sometimes it's easier to do something a little uncomfortable and hard as a parent when we can frame it and see it as what we're modeling for our kids. And if you think about it, if your child was really struggling and needed support, and I like the word support better than help sometimes because it can feel like it's like you deserve support, like some scaffolding. And if you think about it, you would want your child to ask for support if they needed it. And so by you demonstrating, like modeling, right, you are creating community, you are modeling for them that community can look all different ways and that asking for support is not bad, failing, weakness. And I want to say, none of this is easy. I still struggle with this. This is hard. But I do think that modeling piece can be a really helpful, like, lens to see it through. Okay.
So, something that comes up often for parents in the low demand community when they're specifically maybe in the divorce process
Mm,
is intersecting with a court system,
mm-hmm.
lawyers who really don't understand the kind of accommodations
Yeah.
that we're having to make. So they may not understand unschooling. They may not,
Mm-hmm.
they may never have heard of some of these neurodivergent diagnoses, or they don't believe in them, or for some other reason it's
Yeah.
new to them to not use punishment and reward style parenting. And then
Yeah.
it feels for the single parent like their parenting is on display and they have to
Mm,
prove its worthiness to
yeah.
somebody else, whether it's their ex-partner or a judge or
Mm-hmm.
somebody. And it feels like it adds that, like you said, stress is a magnifier. Like it's stressful for all parents to feel like they're being watched while they're doing low
Yeah.
demand parenting, but these parents are being literally picked apart by
Yep.
an independent judge and jury. A lot of the questions that I get asked are like, how do I prove that this is good parenting to other people? And I feel like that's got its whole list of, I can give you peer-reviewed articles and books
Right.
that support this. But the deeper question that I wanted to bring to you is like, how do you believe in yourself enough
Mm, yeah.
when it feels like nobody believes in you?
Yeah.
And I wondered if that's something you've faced or if that's something you've worked with
Yeah.
clients.
Oh my gosh. So hard. This is deep work, right? And this is, so there's a few pieces to what you were just saying and asking about. And it's also complicated when the ex is parenting in a different way and questioning how you're parenting. It's so hard when you're under a microscope and you don't just feel like you're under a microscope, you are under a microscope. And it's, again, legitimately, validly so hard. You're not making it up. It makes sense. This is hard. How do you stand in that? So I thought what you were going to ask is like, how do you prove to the court that this is right? And I agree with you. There's research out there. I would also just add, if you have a child who was really struggling, they were not succeeding in school, they were getting kicked out of school maybe, or having huge explosive meltdowns 2 hours a day, every day, to document that and then document how they're doing now with the low demand parenting approach, so that it isn't just this is what I think we should do, but look, this is what's working, right? This is what's helping my child. And these are the metrics that I'm using to decide to determine that and to show you that. But in terms of that internal work, yes. So number one, I feel like a broken record, but community is so important, right? To not do it in a silo, to not do it on your own. You deserve support and community, and you deserve to know that you're not alone. And I have experienced personally how powerful that is. And I've seen my clients really experience how powerful that is, to, even if the world is telling you you're doing this wrong, to at least have a space where you feel like people get it and people understand and people know that you're doing an amazing, beautiful job. Having a therapist or a coach can be incredibly helpful. Having someone who is in an objective position to support you and is really focused on pouring all of that into you, because again, you deserve it, you need it, and it's not weak to get that, right? It makes sense that you need it. I am a huge believer in journaling, and I think that there are different ways to journal that sort of fit for different people. So one thing that I like to talk about is audio journaling, or I call it audio journaling. I don't know. So instead of typing, that if you don't have someone that you can call on the phone when you need to process and vent in that moment, that you be that person for yourself, that you take your phone and just record yourself. And it speaks
Pre-journaling.
to this other like big picture idea, which is learning to get attuned to your way of processing and your needs and what serves you. And so maybe it's not audio journaling, maybe it's dancing, right? Maybe it's doing yoga and just doing your own flow and finding where your body takes you, right? So there's different ways to do it. There's different languages, different processes. Really giving yourself, again, one of my big themes is the time, the space, and the permission. Permission is something that is so hard for us to give ourselves permission. Give yourself permission to play around and figure out what supports you and what serves you.
When you're stretched to your limit, let's take a rough day. Your
Mm-hmm.
parenting is taking every moment. For a lot of the parents in our community, we don't even go to the bathroom by ourselves. Sometimes our
Mm-hmm.
kids require that kind of total co-regulation. And when there's no one to trade out with, that means it's
Yep.
all you all day. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you have any ideas for ways, little concrete ways that parents can get their needs met when there's no one to tap out with and when the kids' needs are eyes open to eyes closed.
100%. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, it does relate to some of the mindset stuff that we've been talking about, right? This sort of radical acknowledgement and shifting that things are not the exact way that you want them to be. And so we need to expand the definition and shift the definition of what it looks like to get some space. And I know you talk about taking away some of the shame of screen time. Screens can sometimes be your only escape. I had this one client who she was a solo mom, two kids. The kids were like really vying for her attention and she was exhausted. And it escalated. The day became like one of her worst days of parenting. She snapped and yelled and said the things she didn't want to say. Then she felt guilty and shame and withdrew and shut down. And they ended up watching TV for 3 hours while she took a nap. And I said, what would have happened at the beginning of that cycle if you had said, I'm really tired, I need a nap, go watch a movie? Would they have done it? And she's, yeah. So, what keeps us from giving ourselves permission to do that in that moment, recognizing that you need a break. You need sleep in that moment. And in that moment, she needed a nap. She needed rest. And her only option, the only option we could think of in that moment was go watch a movie, and giving yourself permission to use the nuclear option, as it were. Your
And
kids are going to
even
be okay.
something I love putting out there just because it makes people like, ooh, is like, what if your needs even matter most?
Yeah.
What if you are the most fragile element in this whole and most important element in this whole
Mm-hmm.
environment?
Mm-hmm.
I find that makes especially moms' brains explode a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
so used to undervaluing their
Mm-hmm.
role and setting their needs aside and saying, I can handle anything. But there can be seasons where that is just not true anymore, where you are
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
depleted and
Yep.
exhausted and fragile that it
Yep.
does feel like it takes hardly anything for you to shatter.
Yeah.
And how bad is a movie every day for a season if it
Yeah.
helps you put the pieces of yourself back together again? Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be worth it?
And I want to just add to that, yes, the importance of self care and self nurture. And I just want to name it's hard. And it makes sense that it's hard. And you're not alone that it's hard.
And I really appreciate the way you kept coming back to that theme in this conversation. Yeah, that there's no dismissing of the gritty, challenging daily
Yeah.
grind of it.
Yeah.
That, yeah, there's no like magic sauce out there that if you just did it this way, it would be easy that you're missing. You
Mm,
just found that one, two, three, that this is all going to slide in and feel just perfect. Like
mm.
we're sitting with the expert and you're like, that does not exist.
Yeah. So my yin yang here is it's hard, validly, legitimately hard, and small shifts make a big difference. You do have control over some of it, not all of it, but some of it. And you are your child's best asset. And taking care of yourself and learning how to make some of these shifts, there are things that you can do, right? So I don't want to leave people feeling hopeless. It's hard and there's nothing I can do about that. It is hard. We can't fix it all. And there are things that we can do for you to be more resourced, more supported, more confident, more regulated. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always love chatting with you. I have several free resources. One of them is a brief guided meditation relaxation specifically for single parents or anyone who feels like one. I baked into it some mantras and visuals that you can use, even if you don't have that 10 minutes to listen to the whole thing. Once you've listened to it in those tough moments, you can bring those mantras and visuals to mind to support you in that moment. So I'd love for you to grab that.